of the death of the Duke of Edinburgh. Prince Philip's death was announced at about midday London time in a statement from Buckingham Palace, and this is what the statement said. It is with deep sorrow that Her Majesty the Queen announces the death of her beloved husband, His Royal Highness the Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh. His Royal Highness passed away peacefully this morning at Windsor Castle, and further announcements will be made in due course. The royal family join with people around the world in mourning his loss. Our coverage will continue, and my colleague Rita Chakrabarti will be joining you in just a few minutes' time. Before that, it seems a good moment for us to pause and to just reflect on a very long and a very rich life that was lived by the Duke of Edinburgh. He was within weeks of his 100th birthday. He died at the age of 99, and to understand a little more about that life, what he made of it, how he took advantage of his opportunities, how he backed certain causes, and how he made a huge contribution to public life in the UK, here's my colleague Nicholas Witchell.
First after them, her husband, Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, who with his hands between the hands of the Queen becomes her liege man of life and limb and of earthly worship.
At the Queen's coronation, he was the first person after the bishops to pay homage to her. Philip knelt before his wife and pledged his loyalty.
Faith and truth I will bear unto you, live and die,
And so,
against all manner of
rising,
hate.
touches the crown upon her head and kisses her upon the left cheek.
As a male consort to a female sovereign, Philip had no constitutional significance. Yet no one was closer to the monarchy or of greater importance to the monarch than he was. By instinct he was a leader, yet Philip had always to take second place. By nature he spoke his mind, and that sometimes got him into trouble. Yet for decade after decade, his was the support that mattered most to the throne. Philip was born in Corfu in 1921. His family was part of European royalty. He was a prince of Greece, but his ancestors were largely Danish, German and Russian. Philip had a rootless childhood. His family was banished from Greece, his parents separated, and he was sent to Gordonston School in northern Scotland. The Spartan atmosphere there suited him. As the Second World War loomed, Philip was an 18-year-old Royal Navy cadet at Dartmouth.
His Majesty walking down the ranks of the cadets.
And when the King and Queen visited the college, they brought with them their 13-year-old daughter, Princess Elizabeth. According to witnesses, Philip showed off a great deal, but the meeting had made a deep impression on the princess. Philip served in the Royal Navy with distinction during the war. When the fighting ended, he started to escort Elizabeth to family gatherings. He changed his name to Philip Mountbatten and became a British citizen. The public realised there was a romance. Yet within Buckingham Palace, Philip was regarded with suspicion. One courtier wrote privately that he was rough, uneducated, and would probably not be faithful. But Elizabeth was deeply in love, and in the summer of 1947, the palace announced their engagement.
It is with the greatest pleasure that the King and Queen announced the betrothal of their dearly beloved daughter, the Princess Elizabeth, to Lieutenant Philip Mountbatten, R.N.
On the 20th of November 1947, the newly created Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, stood within Westminster Abbey and exchanged marriage vows with the heir to the British throne.
I, Philip.
I, Philip.
Take thee, Elizabeth Alexandra Mary.
Take thee, Elizabeth Alexandra Mary.
To my wedded wife.
To my wedded wife.
Again and again the people called for Elizabeth and Philip. Again and again they joyfully responded.
In 1952, the couple set off on a tour of the Commonwealth. The King came with them to the airport. It was the last time they were to see King George VI, who, unknown to his daughter, was in the final stages of lung cancer.
It was a farewell. It was also, as events turned out, goodbye.
It was at a hunting lodge in Kenya that Philip told his wife of her father's death. Someone who was there said Philip looked as though half the world had dropped on him. They returned to London to lead the national mourning.
And now here is the Queen.
His wife was now Queen. Philip was there in support, but he was never given the title Prince Consort, and his role was undefined. He channeled some of his restless energy into a boisterous social life. He and a group of male friends met every week in rooms above a restaurant in London's Soho. There were long convivial lunches, visits to nightclubs and glamorous companions. By the 1960s, Philip's life was more settled. He and the Queen had completed their family with 2 more children, Andrew and Edward, who joined Charles and Anne, and he had found a new role for himself.
Is it the 18th we're due back now?
80.
From his office in the palace, he promoted issues in which he had a personal interest.
40 minutes to get round the world. Well, it's going to be a bit of a rush. It may leave you a little bit muddled.
Yet diplomacy seemed alien to him. He urged British industry to pull its finger out and complained on American television that the royal family didn't have enough money.
Inevitably, if nothing happens, we shall either have to, I don't know, we may have to move into smaller premises, who knows?
He blundered on a state visit to China with the Queen. He made what he thought was a private remark about slitty eyes. It was a diplomatic gaffe which dominated the headlines and added to his reputation for making misjudged remarks.
It's all right, isn't it?
Yet Philip had a sharp, inquiring mind and was determined to make a contribution of his own. The groundbreaking 60s film Royal Family was made largely at his instigation because he felt it was time for the family to show a more human face to the world.
The salad is ready.
Good.
And for many years he toured the globe as president of the then World Wildlife Fund, speaking out about the need to conserve nature.
We depend on being part of the web of life. We depend on every other living thing on this planet, just as much as they depend on us.
He promoted technology, helped underprivileged children, and had a lifelong interest in spiritual issues. But his most lasting creation was the scheme named after him, the Duke of Edinburgh's Award, which encouraged young people to realise their potential.
To give young people a chance to discover their own abilities for themselves as an introduction to the responsibilities and interests of the grown-up world, and incidentally, to make new friends and have a great deal of fun and satisfaction in the process.
Believe it.
No decade was more difficult for the royal family than the 1990s. The death of Diana, Princess of Wales, was both a family tragedy and a moment of tension for the monarchy. It was the Queen to whom the country looked for public comfort. It was Philip to whom the Queen turned for private support.
And still Prince William, with his head hung, walking next to his grandfather.
It was Philip whose gentle encouragement had persuaded William and Harry to walk behind their mother's coffin to her funeral. And, contrary to his sometimes insensitive image, it had been Philip who'd taken the lead in trying to understand the domestic problems of his children, prompted perhaps by his own memories of what it's like to marry into the royal family. Philip remained physically active at an age when most men would have relished retirement. He went carriage driving, and he was still carrying out more engagements than many younger members of the family. Some he did alone, such as this visit to British troops in Iraq.
How did you get into this?
But most he did with his wife. He was the figure a few paces behind the Queen, always looking out for her, and often guiding children through the barriers to present their flowers to her. By the time of his 90th birthday in June 2011, celebrated at his insistence with little fanfare, he'd accepted that it was time to slow down a little.
I reckon I've done my bit. I want to enjoy myself for a bit now. With less responsibility, less frantic rushing about, less preparation, less trying to think of something to say. On top of that, memory is going. I can't remember names and things. Yes, I'm just sort of winding down.
There was little immediate evidence, though, of any winding down. Despite a serious health scare at Christmas 2011, when he had to be taken to hospital with a blocked coronary artery, he remained at the Queen's side for most of her Diamond Jubilee programme, which took them the length and breadth of the country. It wasn't until 2017 that the Duke, then aged 96, carried out his final solo engagement. It was a parade for the Royal Marines on the forecourt of Buckingham Palace. It was pouring with rain, but, as ever, duty took priority. He took his time meeting those on parade and taking the salute as the Marines marched past to bid him farewell. His life after that was much quieter, spent mostly at the Queen's estate at Sandringham. It was there in January 2019, while he was driving himself from the estate, that he survived a serious road accident. His vehicle overturned, he was badly shaken, and he surrendered his driving licence shortly afterwards. By now he was rarely seen in public. There were occasional appearances at family occasions such as weddings, yet he remained a supportive figure to the Queen and his family. Throughout his adult life, despite the formality of his position, Philip retained his own style of doing things. He made his own uncompromising mark on national life. He once summed up his approach in characteristically forthright fashion.
I've just done what I think is my best. I can't suddenly change my whole way of doing things. I can't change my interests. I can't change the way in which I react to things. It's part of that's somebody's style, and it's too bad. You're lumpy.
Throughout all the monarchy's many ups and downs since the Second World War, Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, the longest-serving consort in British history, was the restless outsider who put his wife and duty first. In doing so, he fulfilled his coronation oath of allegiance to Elizabeth, his Queen. Their marriage and his support were the essential foundations which underpinned the success of her reign. In a speech to celebrate their golden wedding anniversary, the Queen spoke of the debt that she and the country owed him.
He is someone who doesn't take easily to compliments, but he has quite simply been my strength and stay all these years. And I and his whole family, and this and many other countries, owe him a debt greater than he would ever claim, or we shall ever know.
You are watching a special programme here on BBC News. Buckingham Palace has announced the death of His Royal Highness Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh, at the age of 99. Prince Philip was by far the longest-serving consort in British history, a role that he shaped from the start.
Try and grow into it, and that was by trial and error. And, there was no precedent. But if I asked somebody what you expect me to do, they all looked blank. They had no idea. Nobody had much idea.
He was 26 when he married the then Princess Elizabeth in 1947. Within 5 years, she would be Queen.
He has quite simply been my strength and stay all these years. And I and his whole family, and this and many other countries, owe him a debt greater than he would ever claim, or we shall ever know.
Tributes to the Duke and messages of condolence to the Queen have been sent from leaders around the world, including here in the UK.
We mourn today with Her Majesty the Queen. We offer our condolences to her and to all her family. And we give thanks as a nation and a kingdom for the extraordinary life and work of Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh.
In recent years, there had been signs the Duke of Edinburgh's health was declining. He'd been admitted to hospital a number of times throughout the last decade. He returned home to Windsor on the 16th of March after a month-long stay in hospital. His loss will be felt most keenly by the Queen, his family and beyond. People have been laying flowers outside the gates of Windsor Castle, where the Duke passed away peacefully this morning. And the flag is flying at half-mast at Buckingham Palace. We'll be looking back and reflecting on the Duke's extraordinary life of service and of duty. Buckingham Palace has announced the death of His Royal Highness Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh. In a statement, the palace said, "It is with deep sorrow that Her Majesty the Queen announces the death of her beloved husband, His Royal Highness the Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh. His Royal Highness passed away peacefully this morning at Windsor Castle." Further announcements will be made in due course. The royal family join with people around the world in mourning his loss.